Hello, 7th graders. This is Miss Uhas talking to you about lesson 1-3. This is squares and square roots. Before we get started, I want to remind you that you are now responsible for these words in the vocabulary. Please make sure that you put these words and their definitions, as far as you're concerned, and some examples in your notebook. Today you need to make sure you know the meaning of the word square, perfect square, square root, and radical sign. I want to start by talking about the squares of numbers and perfect squares, and we're going to start by looking at this really ugly square photograph that I pulled from your textbook right here. The area of this square is 5 times 5, or 25 square units. And if you actually count the little itty-bitty squares here, you will see that there are 5 squares on each side. And if you count up all of those squares, that equals 25 units squared. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. So the product of a number and itself, the product of 5 and the same number 5, is the square of a number. So the square of 5 is 25. The square of this number is that number multiplied by itself, which in this case would be 5 times 5 is 25. And if you look at that on a page, it would look something like this. The number 25 is the square, and the number 5 is one of the factors. Take a look at 3 times 3. If you were asked to find the square of 3, you would go 3 times 3, which is 3 squared, and of course that equals 9. So 9 is the square of 3, and 3 is the factor that you're multiplying by itself. Now, see if you can find the square of 28, and stop the video. Hopefully you found it by now. The square of 28 is going to be 28 times 28, which would be 28 squared, which would be equal to 784. Some more emphasis on the terminology here. Numbers like 784 and 9 are known as perfect squares because they are the squares of whole numbers. Some other perfect squares would be 144 is the perfect square of 12, 16 is the perfect square of 4, and so on. Okay, now we're going to go in the opposite direction and start looking at square roots. And take a look at the definition that I gave you here and see if you can break it down to understand its meaning. The square root of a number is one of its 2 equal factors, which means that the square root of a number is, and here's the number they're talking about, one of the 2 factors that multiplied together equal that number. So if we take a look at 16, we can see that the 2 equal factors that equal 16 are 4 times 4. Please notice that 4 and 4 here, that's the same number. That's the way it has to work. 4 times 4 is 16, so the square root of 16 is in fact 4. And now I can introduce you to this lovely sign right here. This is called the radical. And anytime you are trying to find a square root, you're going to write the number that you're trying to find the square root of with the radical sign over it. So for example, the square root of 49. There are 2 factors that multiply together equal 49. And remember, they have to be the same factor. Remember, this is 7 squared. So the square root of 49 is 7. In the same way, if you take a look at x times x, that is equal to x squared. So if I told you that x squared was equal to y, then the square root of y, which remember is x times x, would be equal to x. One of those 2 equal factors. All right, so now what I want you to do is see if you can find the square root of 81 and the square root of 64 and stop the video. And when you find the answer, go ahead and start the video again. So 81 has two factors that are multiplied that equal to it, or one factor multiplied by itself, which is 9 and 9. So the square root of 81 is going to be equal to 9. And then if you try to find the square root of 64, you have to think what number multiplied by itself is equal to 64. And that would be 8. So the square root of 64 is equal to 8. Now, ask yourself, are 81 and 64 perfect squares? And the answer is obviously they are. So now you know that vocabulary as well. One more thing I want to add about perfect squares. You're going to see perfect squares a lot when you're trying to find square roots. Do yourself a favor and memorize all of the perfect squares between 4 and 144. All right, if you have those in your memory as basic math facts, for example, if I say to you 144, you automatically know that the square root of 144 is 12. You're going to be a lot happier. Please trust me on this. Okay, that's about it with squares and square roots. We're going to do a lot of practice with this because the only way to learn this is to do it over and over again. And that's all I have for you guys. Take care. Bye.